Well, we're going to continue on in the next couple of videos, I think 3 videos actually. We're going to talk about decision making and how the computer can do different things based on the decision that it makes. And so we need to do a little bit of talking about the decision structure called if, then, else. And what this does is it allows you to tell the computer if something occurs, then do this, else if something else occurs, then maybe do this, else if neither of those things happen, then do this. And you make decisions like this all the time. You watch the Weather Channel, it tells you there's an 80% chance of rain, and you say to yourself, if there's greater than a 50% chance of rain, then I'm going to take an umbrella, else I'll leave it at home. And so what we're going to do is we're going to get the computer to make some of those decisions for us using what are called the comparison operators. So we're going to talk about those first, then I'll show you the generic structure of an if-then statement. The comparison operators are used a lot of times to see if something is true or something has occurred, and you do these comparisons all the time. So I'm going to start with probably the ones that are most common to you. There's a weird thing that I'm going to save till the end about equal. So something can be greater than, something can be less than, something can be greater or equal to something, something can be less than or equal to something, something can be not equal to something. We use the exclamation point to be the word not in this case. And then the last one that's kind of weird is a lot of people want to say if something is equal to something. But when we're doing comparisons, we actually have to use what's called a double equal sign, because that will cause the computer to do a comparison instead of assign things. We've assigned things to variable names, and we do that with a single equal sign. And when we're comparing to see if something is equal to something else, we actually have to use a double equal sign. And that throws a lot of people off, because if you do a statement and you're trying to compare, and you say if A equal to B, what that actually causes the computer to do is to actually take what's in A and assign it to the variable B, and that's obviously not what we're after, so we'll use the equal sign. So let's talk about the generic structure. And there's a lot of funky syntax in this, and again, another reason why I encourage you to use Dreamweaver to write your code, because it can help with some of this. But what we'll say is we'll say if something to compare. So we have what we're comparing. If A greater than B, if F name equals blank, if their class hours equal 90. That's what we're comparing. And if that is true, then we're going to have them do something. Now, we're not going to type out the word then. What we'll do is we'll put curly braces around the statements that we will execute if that's true. So then do something. So we might alert, we might write to the screen, we might change a variable, we might accumulate totals, or all kinds of things that we can do in there. Now if we want to check a second thing, we can use the structure. We can use else if, and again we include those statements in curly braces, then do something different. And finally, you can end this with an else, which means it's run out of options. It wasn't this first thing, it wasn't this second thing, so every other option is going to have a last thing. Now, one thing to know about the way an if statement works is if you have an if, another condition, and another condition to check, when the computer finds a true statement, it will drop out of this structure. So if we say if A is equal to B, and let's say in this case that A indeed is equal to B, then it would do this statement right here and then ignore the rest of the structure. If A weren't equal to B, And if we came down here and did, well, let's find out if A is greater than B. If A indeed is greater than B, it would skip this first statement because it's not equal to it. And it would come down here and it would do this statement but skip this last statement. And so if A indeed were less than B, it's not equal, it's not greater than, it would come down here and hit this last option and execute that. And so what we can do is we can use these things to tell the computer to branch off in different directions based on user input, based on something that happens. And that's the basic structure that we're going to use in our example today. And like I mentioned at the top of the video, we're going to go ahead and do 3 examples of this. This very first one is going to be pretty simple. We're going to have the users enter the number of hours that they've completed. I'm here in Dreamweaver, we're going to have a simple form where the student will say how many hours they have, and we're going to take that information off the form and we're going to put an alert up telling them whether they're a freshman, sophomore, junior, or senior. In the next one, we're going to use if-then statements to validate information on a form, and then the third example I'm going to use with if-then statements is going to be a guessing game. Guess a number between 1 and 100 and keep giving feedback until the answer is correct. Now, I'm doing these in 3 different videos because the other 2 examples are a little bit long, and I know that after a while you're like, oh, come on, be quiet, I need a break or something like that. So we're going to kind of chunk these up a little more than I have in the past. Alright, so here I am in Dreamweaver with my form. I'm going to go over to the code view, and we're going to go ahead and start writing this in our page. Now, this is going to occur when the user enters their name, their hours, and then they click our button. And so we know that means that we're probably going to call a function using the onClick event. So I'm going to go ahead and do that first. I'm going to go say, when we click on that, I want you to call a function called determine class. So then what we're going to do is go up to the head section and actually write the code that allows us to determine their class. So I come up here to the head section, I start with my script tag. I forgot those quotes. And I'm going to automatically close my script tag so I don't forget. And then I'm going to define my function. So in this case, function name is going to be determine class. We put those parentheses in, and we enclose all of our functions inside curly braces. Now this is going to get a little crazy because when we start all these if then else statements that have their own sets of curly braces, we need to be sure and have those match up, because if you forget a curly brace, then your program's not going to run because you're going to have a syntax error. Alright, so the first thing we have to do before we start comparing something is we actually have to go to the form and get their input. So in this case, we're taking whatever they filled into your hours, we're going to take the value property off of that, and we're going to use it in our comparison. So the first thing we're going to do is set up a variable. I'm going to name it their hours, and we're going to set that equal to whatever's on the document on form 1 in the text box named your hours, and we're going to grab the value of that. So whatever they entered gets stored into our new variable named their hours. So now all we do is we do our comparisons. We start our if statement, and remember, whatever we're going to compare is going to be in the condition. Notice Dreamweaver here gives a little pop-up menu showing me the correct syntax for this, so it knows that I have to put my condition inside the parentheses. So I'm going to say if their hours is greater than 90, then that means that they are a senior. So I'm going to open up my curly brace, and I'm going to automatically close my curly brace. I do this to keep these lined up. Notice Dreamweaver will also automatically indent the curly braces to give you a little bit of a visual cue of which ones have opened and which ones have closed. So between those curly braces, I'm going to write my statement that's going to execute if their hours are greater than 90. So I'm going to say, alert, you are a senior. And before we move on, I want to talk about the logic of this. As these decisions get made, your logic in your program gets a little bit more complicated. So let's look at my condition here. If their hours is greater than 90, that's true. If they have 92 hours, they are a senior. If they have 437 hours, they're a senior. But what if they have 90 hours? According to Tarleton and most schools, that means they're also a senior. So if I entered 90 on the form and clicked my submit button, their hours greater than 90, because they've entered 90. 90 is not greater than, it's greater than or equal. So we need to pay attention as we're writing these programs to make sure that we do the logic that allows us to have the correct output. So I went back and changed our condition saying their hours is greater than or equal to 90. So that's our first option. Now I'm just going to go through these real quick. I'm going to say if else, and I'm going to say their hours greater than or equal to 80. And one of the first questions I always get when I do this in class is, why do you not have to do an and statement and compare to make sure that they're between, not 80, between 60 and 90? And the answer is remember, if their hours were greater than or equal to 90, it would have put up the alert and would have skipped out of the rest of these comparisons. So we don't need to repeat the comparison to make sure that they're less than 90. At this point we can just see if they're less than 60. I'm sorry, greater than or equal to 60, because whatever's left is what we're looking for. So I'm going to go ahead and do an alert that says you're a sophomore or a junior. Now I'm also going to do this because there's another thing I want to revisit from the very beginning of our class when we talked about lining up double quotes and single quotes. As we get into some of the programs that use quotes and things like that, we might run into a problem with single quotes and double quotes that are actually part of the output that we want to run. And you notice up here in Dreamweaver it says there's a syntax error on line 14. It's really down here on the next line, but I'm sorry, no there's not. I did this backwards. Else, if. I do have a syntax error too here, because what's going to happen is the computer's going to see these double quotes and then it's going to see the single quote, and it's going to think that I'm opening up another set of quotes when I really just want that single quote to show up. And so what I'm going to do is use the escape character, and what the escape character does to the computer is it says, don't interpret this as a quote, a single quote or a double quote, just print it like I told you to. And the way you do that is you put a backslash in front of the character, and so this tells the computer escape from what you would normally do and just go ahead and literally print that on there. And so I wanted to show you that because in this case you are a senior. It's not unheard of that we'd say you're a junior. So I'm going to go ahead and finish the next one out. So I'm going to say else if their hours greater than or equal to 30, because remember, anybody greater than 90 has already dropped out. Anybody greater than 60 has already dropped out. So now we're just going to compare to see if they're greater than 30. And we're going to put in those curly braces. And we're going to go ahead and put up an alert that says, maybe if I can type, we're going to, you're a sophomore. And then the last thing we're going to do is, instead of doing another comparison, we're just going to go ahead and say else, because we don't have any more options. We've run out. They either are greater than 90, they're between 90 and 60, they're between 60 and 30, or they're below 30. We could do an else if their hours greater than equal or less than 30 if we wanted to, but there's no need, because this will run for every other option, which is only things that are below 30. So we'll go ahead and put in our alert here that informs the person that they're a freshman. And it looks like I forgot my apostrophe up here. Alright, so it's not an earth-shatteringly important program, but it does allow us to branch through this. Now when you have this logic, you really want to test out all your options. So I'm going to go preview this in Firefox. Hope we don't have any errors. We'll see as we go along. And it might take a minute for the browser to come up. So here's our form. Let's test out the upper limits. I have 852 hours of credit at Tarleton. So it tells me I'm a senior. Boy howdy, am I a senior. Let's test those on the cusp. I have 90. Yay, still a senior. So go in and test all of them. I have 65. I'm a junior. I have 45. I'm a sophomore. And I have 2. And I'm a freshman. Notice because the else at the very end, if I were to come in here and put in something ludicrous, like I have negative 863 hours, it's still going to tell me that I'm a freshman because it's less than 30, which is that last catch-all. Alright, so that's our program. That's a very simple, straightforward approach to if-thens. Again, the syntax is a little burdensome here. You need to remember that what you're comparing needs to be inside those open and closing parentheses, and what you're executing, if that if statement is true, needs to go in between these opening and closing curly braces. So like I said, in the next lesson what we're going to do is we're going to learn how to validate a form. Not only are we going to practice our if-thens, but we're going to learn one extra aspect of functions to return a value back to the program that called it.